Hi everyone, my name is Sam. Thanks so much for joining me in this yoga practice today. Today's class will be pretty much self-led. We're going to talk about the structure and design of a yoga flow and just teaching you how to do that as your own practice. So if you want to grab a pillow, you can. You can always incorporate that, especially if it's uncomfortable to sit directly on your hips. But basically, when we're structuring a yoga class or when you are doing yoga on your own, there's a lot of room for customization. So it's going to come down to what your needs are, and your body will really tell you what poses you need the most. Those are typically the ones that are most difficult for us, the ones we tend to avoid. But at the beginning of the class, as you know, we're always going to start by dropping in. So what that means is we always frame the class with a little bit of meditation. So when you drop in, that's just an opportunity in the beginning to take some time to meditate if you want to, or just to notice how you're feeling in your body today. And so one of the cues I often give when we're dropping in is just notice how you feel in the physical body, in the intellectual body, in the emotional body, and in the spiritual body. And for different people, that means different things, but that's just kind of a cue to get your mind considering and observing and surveying yourself and just understanding where you are when you settle in on the mat. So part of the purpose is to determine what you want the theme or the mantra for your practice to be, to understand why you came to the mat today, and to stay focused on your goals. But it's also just to train the mind, just to clear the thoughts, to start connecting with the breath, and to start settling in. So a lot of these poses, as you know, we come to stillness or we hold the pose for a long time. So dropping in and meditating. And then typically I have a sequence or a flow designed or ordered for you already. But really when I'm designing those flows, I'm thinking about how it feels in my body as I'm moving through it. And I'm thinking about what my goals are for the practice. So there are millions of combinations of poses you can do together. And I encourage you to explore as we're doing these and find other poses or variations of poses that your body's asking you for. So when we're finished dropping in at the beginning, we've settled in, we've meditated a little bit if we want to. That's when I like to work just gently on the extremities. So if you have wrist issues, for example, this is a good time just to bring the palms together, press into one another, maybe rotate the fingertips away from the body, toward the body, and just explore the articulation of the wrists. These are not yoga poses, obviously. We're just teaching you to be more aware of what you're feeling and just listening to the feedback you're getting from your physical body. You can also interlace the fingertips here, just kind of move through the general articulation of the wrists and the fine articulation of the wrists, noticing what you feel, maybe pressing away, and just taking the time in the beginning to give all of the parts of your body the attention they need as you warm up for what would be your flow. So beyond the wrist, feet and ankles, I always like to give attention to. There are a couple of ways that we can do that. I also like to start with the head and neck. A lot of people carry tension in the neck and shoulders, so if you're choosing to warm up and that sounds like you, that's something that you can do. One of my favorite things for the neck is just these half moon circles. Dropping the chin toward the chest, rolling from the left to the right. And then you've both seen in my classes variations of this. So there are a couple of things we typically do, including drawing circles with the nose, getting bigger with those circles, reversing those circles. And really all you're doing here is just noticing and just moving through your range, exploring your range before you incorporate more major movements. You've also seen us send one hand out and then sink it down to the hip with your fingers flipped up toward the forearm, toward the elbow. and then just tilting the neck in the opposite direction. And then again, exploring, rocking forward, rocking backward. But when I, as a yoga teacher, am putting poses together in succession, I'm really mostly listening to the way it makes me feel in my body. And that's what you should do too. So feel free to explore any of those poses that we typically do. Remember, there are variations for each one. So you find what works for you today. And we're doing this really casually. So I'm not going to necessarily cue this up, but you can switch sides when you're ready. Really just explore organically. So your practice should be solely your own. It's going to be unique for every person. So again, you're going to base that on your goals for the practice, your need, how you're feeling in your body that day, how you're feeling emotionally, mentally that day. Another one I like to do is stretching through the upper back and through the chest, just by opening up the arms up wide, bringing the scapula together behind you, checking out your range, just noticing, and then finding that big embrace or eagle arms across the body, and turning in for some breath work. So you can inhale, lift the elbows up, exhale, turn inward, relax the head and neck. And remember, you're always incorporating your breath work. So the breath is one of the most powerful tools in yoga. It can help you stay grounded. It can help you relieve stress. It can help you find your rhythm. It can help you stay focused. So just keep coming back to the breath, no matter what you're doing in your practice. And slowly curl up when you're ready, and then just check out your range again. Open up the arms, see if anything's different, and you are just noticing how your body's acting, how your body's, I don't want to say performing, but just how you feel in your body as you move through these. I also like to check in with the side body before we start moving, so there are a couple ways to do that. Spinal twists are really great, including just swimming that right arm behind you, planting the left hand on top of the right thigh, and really pulling back through the right shoulder. We've done this many times. And you're just remembering the integrity of that length in the spine and your nice deep breaths. Remember, this practice is your own today, so switch sides whenever you're ready. If this is your first kind of movement of the day, your first stretching, your first exercise of the day, you're going to probably be a little stiff because fascia builds up overnight while we're sleeping, and that's okay. So just remember to always be gentle with your body. You're looking for that balance between ease and effort. So you're furthering your practice, but you're not forcing the body into any shapes. And that's the great part about practicing on your own, is that you have no other bodies to compare it to. You're just really trying to stay present in what you're feeling. Hips are going to be the most important, or one of the most important anatomical aspects to focus on. So I always check in with the hips right away, and we work the hips a lot throughout the practice. One way we like to check in is by sending the hands up and overhead, finding that forward fold, and then walking the hands left to right. So feel free to explore there. Notice what you feel. And then remember too that you can switch which shin is in front, and that will give you, that will change which side you feel the deepest sensation on in terms of your hips. So take your time, just noticing what you feel, exploring your body, exploring your range. Try to always give yourself space and grace, even when you don't have an instructor reminding you to. And what that means is we're just always honoring and respecting where the body is each day. Every day is going to be different. Every day you'll have days that are more flexible or less flexible. And that's okay. You'll have those asymmetries in the body, and that's okay too. So just customize your practice to focus on the things that your body is asking for most. When you've done your good bit of warming up, and in the beginning your warm-up should not be long holds, just simple dynamic movement, then it's always great to check in with a little spinal flexion and extension with cat-cow. So we'll come forward onto all fours. There are a couple of poses that you'll see in most practices, and that's because they're just so great. There's so many benefits, and cat-cow is one of them. Spinal flexion and extension is really important. So you know what to do here. Inhale, drop the belly, lift the gaze, try to stay open through the chest, and really peel that tailbone up toward the ceiling. And then exhale, press into the palms, arching through the back, drawing the low ribs in. And you just find your rhythm. From cat-cow, there's a number of variations and other types of movement you can do, so feel free to explore. You've seen us do many variations of this and poses similar to this that are not necessarily traditional yoga poses. And those include maybe just drawing circles with your hips, which kind of massages through the outer hip, lets you know what's going on there. And as you're easing into your practice, you're just noticing. You're just collecting that information, noticing what you feel, listening to what your body's telling you. Yoga is a great place to really hone in on the difference between discomfort and pain, especially if you are rehabilitating an injury or trying to overcome recurring pain in the low back, the hips, anywhere. So this is a good time for you to practice just being present, aka being mindful, moving with intention, and just observing without judgment. I also like to just draw circles with the ribs here. You can bend in the elbows if you need to, and really just pretend like you're in the inside of a barrel or a tube and you're just touching all sides of the barrel. So what we're doing here is moving the spine in and out of its natural, neutral curvature. Spine has a natural curve, and within those curves, we store potential energy. So as you move, you're not only breaking up fascia that causes stiffness, but you're also releasing that energy and kind of removing pathway blockages and just allowing your energy to flow a little better. And some of that you just can't teach in a class, so that's why it's always important to explore on your own. Other variations of this for the side body that I like, I think last week we did this, but you can extend one leg out long and just bring it to the other side and then look over your shoulder at that foot, and you'll really feel that connection in the right side body or whatever the opposite side of the same side as your extended leg. So check in with stuff like that. And when I started designing my own sequences for my own practice, I really just started by remembering the poses that I love the most from other people's classes. So if you have favorite poses, it's easy to build around those, even if in the beginning it's not very intuitive. So another pose that you'll almost always find in Hatha Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga is Downward Dog. So you're going to curl the toes under for that. Really peel the tailbone up toward the ceiling or toward the sky. You're rotating the hands slightly outward, and you're bringing the chest toward the tops of the thighs. So especially first thing in the morning, hamstrings are always going to be stiff. Feel free to put a bend in those knees if you need to. This is also a great place to find easy organic movement by pushing through the feet, bending into the knees, alternating that walking motion. Take your time, especially in the mornings, noticing what you're feeling, and just trying to stay present. You can also just find stillness in downward dog if you prefer that. Most important thing here is that you have a flat back. So again, keep the knees bent if you need to, especially in the morning. Trying to relax the head and neck. Really trying to pull the tailbone up toward the ceiling. These poses where the upper body is kind of upside down are called inversions. Headstands, handstands are included in that. And they're really good just for redirecting blood flow, kind of moving lymph and other substances throughout the body. Again, clearing energy blockages, etc., etc. So you can notice how you feel with certain poses and incorporate them accordingly. From here, we'll move into another common pose. So we're going to lift that right leg up really high. This is three-legged dog. If you want to open up through the hips a little bit more, you can bend into that right knee, drop that heel toward the left shoulder. Try to stay square through the shoulders, pressing into both palms evenly. And then we're going to tuck that knee up and in, bring it between the hands and plant it on the mat. So from here, if you came up directly, hands up overhead, you're coming into your high lunge. If you drop the knee here, you're coming into your low lunge, and you can uncurl the toes. Low lunge is great to get into the hips, especially if you're practicing long holds. You can also bring interlace fingers to the top of that right thigh, just to press in a little bit deeper. Your sequence, your flow can be as fast or as slow as you want it to be. Sometimes, like in yin yoga, we do longer holds, 3 to 5 minutes. And just nice and gentle, focusing on lower body, staying low to the ground. So if you need some grounding, if you need some self-care, it's great to do that. If you're trying to use yoga as exercise, it's good to keep moving. Keep that flow going, lots of dynamic movement. But whatever we do to one side, we're going to do on the other side. So whatever you've explored here, you're going to bring the palms back to frame that foot. Curl the left toes under. Send that right foot back. And then a great transition between poses is your vinyasa. So what vinyasa is this plank pose, lowered to the belly, pressing up to cobra. All poses you know. And then pressing back up to downward dog. But there is another variation where you can start from plank, and instead of lowering all the way to the belly, you would come to upward dog. So you're going to roll forward onto the tops of the feet, the tops of the toes. Press the hips down toward the mat, but you keep the hips and the thighs elevated off the mat. So this is upward facing dog. It's more advanced, but you can incorporate this at any time in your vinyasas. So whichever variation you took, you ended up opening up through the chest, melt it back down, and we'll end up back in downward dog. So from here, we'll do the same thing on the second side. Whatever you do to one side, always do to the other. So you'll plant that right foot, lift the left leg up high. Notice any differences. Maybe it's the same, maybe it's not. If you want to open up into that left hip, drop that left heel toward the right shoulder. Lift the gaze, press into both palms evenly, and bring that foot all the way through to plant between the palms. So again, we'll lower that back knee, uncurl the toes, pressing up to your low lunge, or repeating anything that you did on the first side. So So what I would recommend is just checking in with all of the parts of the body that you're going to use in your flow before really getting into those harder poses or that consistent movement, those consistent flows. So when you're ready to come out, when you feel satisfied, when you feel good about it, and you can stay there as long as you want, we'll go through our vinyasa again. So curl the right toes under, find your plank, and then you can either lower halfway to upward facing dog or all the way down to the belly for cobra, and we'll meet in downward dog. So we repeat downward dog a lot in these sequences because it's a good pose just to catch your breath. It's a good pose to stretch through the hamstrings, and you will feel your range of motion get bigger and bigger as we go. Just because as your body heats up, you're going to start breaking up that fascia and lose a little bit of that stiffness. All right. You can also just find stillness at any time, like I said. And there are other variations you can take from downward dog too, like by bringing that right hand to the outside of the left leg, looking under your shoulder. You'll feel that a lot in the left leg. Same thing on the right. And back to downward dog when you're ready. And then we'll go through a warrior sequence. So we'll plant that left foot again, bring that right leg up. Notice if your range has changed at all, maybe not. Lift your gaze when you're ready, bring that foot all the way up and through. And then we're gonna lift up, instead of to high lunge, we're gonna lift and open up to warrior two. So for that, you're gonna angle your back foot toward that front left corner of the mat. Right toes stay pointing forward, and we're gonna bend that knee to about 90 degrees. Get as low as you can. So you'll open up the arms left to right, palms facing downward parallel to the floor, and your torso is kind of facing toward the left side of your mat. So this is what warrior two looks like. Warrior two and variations of warrior are great for building strength in the lower body. That's why you commonly see them in these practices. From here, I like to go into a reverse warrior. So just bringing that left hand to the back of the left thigh, right hand up and over. Feels really great in the right side body and builds strength in the lower body. Then we can straighten through that right knee if you want to. You're in your reverse triangle. Leveling out to parallel, shifting the hips back, pulling that front hand forward like you're on a string, and then bringing that down to the outside of that shin, left hand up to the ceiling, Trikonasana or triangle pose. So that's a way just to sequence those poses. You can cycle your arm back down to frame that foot. And then once you end up here with your foot framed, there's a couple other poses you can incorporate, but typically this is where you would put in your vinyasa, put in your transition sequence. So go ahead and take whatever version of that feels right for your practice. And you'll always find yourself back in downward facing dog. Remember, this practice is your own. So make it your own. And every suggestion I give you is just a suggestion. You can always take your practice off the rails, which is the great thing about virtual yoga. You can really do whatever you want. But whatever you do to one side, we will also do on the other. So coming into your warrior two on the second side when you're ready. Just building strength in the lower body. Building heat, and then see if you can remember that sequence. I like to do that reverse warrior, keeping that front knee really bent, building strength, really challenging yourself, finding that edge between ease and effort, and then extending through that knee, reverse triangle, setting up for your Trikonasana, finding that leverage. Bringing that left hand down, right hand up. Maybe look up toward the ceiling this time. And just trying those very minor variations and noticing how they change the way you feel in your body. That's it. Cycle that right hand down when you're ready. Find your vinyasa. And back to downward dog. All right, so we've all done all of these poses together. I'm just kind of talking through how we sequence those poses and why. Other poses that we love to do. If you're designing your own sequence or you're practicing at home, you've gone through the poses that we just did, Warrior Two and all that, and you're ready for some longer holds, getting into the hips is really great with any variation of lizard or pigeon. So we're going to move into a pigeon pose from three-legged dog, right leg up. And we're going to bring that right knee to somewhere behind the right wrist. Coming down onto our hips, finding your nice long spine before we melt down into pigeon. And if you hate pigeon, you probably need it, but if you hate pigeon, you can also skip it. Or try maybe lizard for the hips instead. Either way, when you come into these poses where you're challenging your flexibility, that's where you'll incorporate those longer holds, and the setup is more important. So when you're ready, come down to your stacked fists or stacked palms, or if you have a prop or a pillow. And when you're doing these longer holds, you're just trying to find stillness, both in the physical body and in the mind. So let's take a second just to practice that. So come back to the breath. Notice where your thoughts go when poses are difficult, or the sensations are strong. And also don't forget to give yourself poses that you can rest in while building flexibility and self-awareness. This feels great and you want to challenge yourself, stay there as long as you'd like. Just remember, whatever you do on one side, do the same thing on the other. Take your time transitioning when you do. Never rush out of a pose. Take your time to come back into the foundation of the pose, just noticing how you feel there before you unravel and find your second side. Remember, you can always take a vinyasa before you switch sides. It can be a great transition, especially if you are using yoga for your form of exercise for the day. Remember your breath work. Remember to stay present. Can also be really great if you're practicing on your own, just to keep a journal of some of the poses that you're practicing regularly and just how you feel after the practice, before the practice, etc. It can also be good to write down your mantra or what brought you to the mat that day. And sometimes yoga as a practice can really bring up a lot of emotions for people and help us work through traumas and things of that nature. So having a journal nearby when you're practicing on your own is very helpful. It can really help you sort through those things and understand yourself and your practice better. When you're ready to come out of this, do so mindfully, staying present, finding that integrity in the spine like always, coming back to the breath. And then we'll go through a couple other variations of poses that are less typical. So you can take a vinyasa here or just meet in downward dog. And from downward dog, I'm going to suggest that we walk the feet up into a standing forward fold. So you can just walk up the midline of the mat, coming into my favorite inversion. Nice and slow, nice and mindful. Have a little fun with it. When you're practicing on your own, nobody's watching. It's just you. So find the poses you enjoy, listen to your body, stay present in those sensations. So standing forward fold looks super simple, but it's actually very dynamic. There's a lot you can do here. So as my palms are just resting on the mat, I am actively pressing my rib cage down toward my thighs. And I'm not super flexible, so you probably can't tell, but there are other things you can do here too, like wrapping the arms around the legs, just finding your balance, finding a change of perspective. And sometimes those mental, emotional, psychological aspects of yoga are just as beneficial as the physical. So just literally changing your perspective in these inversions. I'm also pressing the knees to extension. I'm really connecting with my hamstrings here. I've cued this up before, but you can also sway left to right. You can clasp opposite elbows, relax the head and neck. You can also walk the fingertips off to the side. Maybe frame that left foot on the left side of the mat. Same thing on the right. But the point is to explore. So this in itself is not a yoga pose necessarily. Standing forward fold is the pose, and we do our exploration from that. So there's a lot of ways to explore. Then when we're exploring the halfway lift, that's part of the sun salutation. Same thing there. There's a lot of opportunity to explore just in this simple pose. So you can bring palms together at the heart. That helps you stay focused or connect with your mantra or your purpose here today. You can also bring hands to the tops of the thighs. Maybe imagine getting long through the spine. Whatever you're working on, whatever your goals are, and however you feel should dictate the variation you take in this pose and any pose. Another one you can do is just bringing the arms behind you, airplane arms, getting long, and you're really focusing on building strength in the low back here, getting long through the spine, remembering that the neck is a nice long extension of the spine and just honoring that. All right. Another inversion that I love is the wide-legged forward fold. So it's the same thing, but you're just going to take a wide stance, and you can do any exploration in this pose that we just did in the traditional forward fold. So always start by setting yourself up right, bringing fingertips to the mat or to the floor. We're going to right away connect with the spine. Make sure you're protecting the integrity of that natural curvature, getting nice and long, engaging the abdominals and the low back to support. And then finding Any variation that works for you. So you can bring fingertips in line with the hands, maybe even bring your head down to the mat. You can also walk the hands left to right, just like we did in the standing forward fold. Notice what you feel. And notice how that exploration shows you things that your body is maybe asking for, but unaware of. Our bodies tend to get really good at what we repeatedly ask them to do. So it's important to ask them to take on new forms and new shapes and new poses and new types of movement all the time. So doing so, finding that exploration in your practice will help build longevity and good health over time. All right, so there are about a million other poses that we typically do. We're not going to have time to go through in an hour class, but when you're finished with whatever your flow looks like, you can come back down to the mat and then you'll do your cool down poses, quote unquote cool down poses. All right, so we'll come back to sitting and let's find our head to knee pose first, or just listen to your body. It's your practice. I'm going to bring my left foot in to the inside of the right thigh, right hand to the outside of the right foot, and without forcing, I'm going to bring that left arm up and over and come down toward that knee. And I'm not aiming for any specific shape here. What I'm doing is listening to what I'm feeling in my body and letting that dictate where I go next. So if I feel very limber, and maybe I'm not getting that effort, I'm not putting in any effort, and I want to work on deepening my flexibility, then maybe I'll bring my nose toward my knee. But we're never forcing any poses in yoga. You really just want to respect and honor where you are. Advocate for your body. Lead with love. And don't worry so much about conformity or progression. So you've also seen us do this other variation of head to knee where we turn the torso toward that foot, and same thing, bring the head toward the knee. You can do a really passive version of this if that's what you're feeling. You can also grab the foot, remember not forcing. But I encourage you to explore, to always take your time, to repeat everything you do on one side to the second side, and to come back to the breath when you get distracted, if you get distracted. One of the goals of yoga is to quiet the mind, or the chitta vritti, which is the mind chatter, which is pretty much constant for all human brains. Yoga is a good way to practice discipline in just giving yourself that space to exist without preparing for your day or reliving memories or things of that nature. We're really just learning to be present, to care for the body, find that marriage, that fine line between ease and effort, and ultimately to find non-duality or complete self-awareness, which is separate from the ego and one of the spiritual components of yoga, the spiritual basis of yoga. I also sometimes take this time just to move my body, even if the poses are not official yoga poses. So if you're practicing on your own, like one pose I like to do is the 90-90, because it's a simple internal external rotation of the hips, which a lot of us don't get in day-to-day life. And it's good for you, and it feels great. So find your two 90-degree angles in the knees. And finding very gentle micro movement here, or you can just come into a long hold. Just listen to your body, notice what you're feeling in the hips. Change sides only when you're ready. Bringing that first 90-degree angle in front of you. Other knee is in line with the hip, 90 degrees at that knee. Same thing, always find your nice long spine first, connect with the breath, and then melt forward over that shin, just opening up through the hip. And so what we're going through here today together is pretty much just a full body practice. If you were theoretically doing your practice on your own, these are some of the many poses you could try. So like I said, when you start doing that, you'll do that first based on the poses that you connect with the most, the poses that you like the most. So we'll take a couple more of our favorite cool down poses. Feel free to try what you like. I love this puppy pose. Child's pose is really great. Extended child's pose. Froggy stretch. Even if you wanted to come into puppy pose and then thread the needle for some upper back and shoulder work. Listen to your body and stay connected with your purpose. I'm going to bring my arms in to come into froggy pose, so I'm going to send my knees wide, point my toes away from one another, coming onto the forearms, and just opening up through the hips a little bit, maybe rock gently forward and backward, or explore from any pose that you are currently in. Before we move into Shavasana, I like to do like a little happy baby or cat pulling its tail, which we've only done a couple times. But really you can take any movement before you settle in that feels good. Anything your body's asking you for. Forward folds are also great, including the seated forward fold, or just folding inward from cobbler's pose. Those can be really great for turning inward, connecting with the breath, letting go of that mind chatter. So I'm just going to take a seated forward fold and then move into Shavasana. We'll always close that practice with the 5 to 10 minutes of Shavasana. I would encourage you to do that. If it's your first movement of the day and you're afraid to fall asleep, maybe skip Shavasana and meditate in a seated posture. But try not to sleep on Shavasana. It deserves its time, and it's really great for meditation. And for just absorbing the nutrients of your practice, feeling what you feel, staying connected with the mat for a few more minutes. and giving ourselves space for self-care. When you got what you need from whatever pose you're in, we'll curl up to sitting and then come into Shavasana. Get there however you get there. I encourage you to challenge yourself. And I'll guide you through a little meditation, which I typically do at the end of classes anyway. But as you come into Shavasana, you're really just going to reflect back on that mantra or what brought you to the practice today. Really let your body relax, fully relax. Try to find stillness here. And you're really just trying to clear the mind. So there's a couple ways that I do that. If I'm having a hard time, I try to imagine my thoughts just as clouds coming and going in the sky. We're practicing non-attachment, so you can observe those thoughts that come up, but you're not going to indulge them. We're not going to investigate them. We're not going to judge them. We're just going to let them come and let them go. Another analogy I like to use about this meditative state is just letting your cork float. So you're just floating. Not connected to anything, not attached. Just noticing how you feel. Notice your natural breathing rhythm. Stay connected to that. And let the breath just come and go with ease. Just remember when you start practicing on your own to let go of perfectionism, let go of the ego, and just focus on exploration. Focus on trying new things. When you find something that feels really great or needs a little work, then you incorporate that into your practice and do those poses regularly. But your individual practice will always look different from everyone else's, and that's okay. You can stay in Shavasana if you'd like. Typically, I close the class here with a little prayer, a little land acknowledgement. I'm going to come up to a seated position and show you how I close the practice when I'm practicing on my own. So if I'm practicing on my own, if I'm not meditating in Shavasana, I like to meditate in Siddhasana, just sitting, cross-legged seat, finding what works. Typically I have my eyes closed just to stay in that state. And then today we're going to do a little chant. So you're welcome to join me for that if you want to. A little background on that. A lot of practitioners close their practice with the closing or the greeting, Namaste, which means I bow to you in Sanskrit. So for some people that doesn't feel culturally appropriate, and for some people it does. When I'm teaching a class, I do close with Namaste because I do practice yoga as part of my spiritual practice every day. But you don't have to do that, especially if you're on your own. One thing that I do love is a single chant of the word Om, which is an important word in yoga as it encompasses every sound that the vibration of space can make, basically. Every word stems from Om, and Om is symbolic of the source of energy or vibration in the universe, in the known world. So you can do that. You can bring palms together if you like. It's also really great just as a breath practice. So I'm going to close today's practice that way by bringing palms together at the heart. We'll inhale together and then we'll have an extended chant of Om just one time. So if you want to join me, please feel free. You can inhale together, nice big inhale. Om. Namaste. Thanks so much. Have a good day.